The social sciences, far from producing a progressive narrowing of differences and a growing agreement on a common body of knowledge and of principles capable of explanation and prediction, like the natural sciences, has seen each generation undermine the beliefs of its predecessors rather than building on it and refining them. What we see is a war of methodologies within and between fields. In fact, the fundamental idea of the whole enterprise, the attempt to remove values from the consideration of human behavior and simply to apply the scientific method, has seemed most implausible. To me, however, the greatest shortcoming of most attempts at liberal education today, with their individualism or individualized, unfocused, and scattered curricula, is their failure to enhance the students' understanding of their role as free citizens of a free society and the responsibilities that imposes upon its citizens. Every successful civilization must possess a means for passing on its basic values to each new generation. When it no longer does so, its days are numbered. The danger is particularly great in a society such as our own, the freest the world has ever known, whose special character is to encourage doubt and questioning even of its own values and assumptions. Such questioning has always been and remains a distinctive, I would say, admirable and salutary part of our education and our way of life. As long as there was a shared belief in the personal and social morality taught by the Judeo-Christian tradition, and so long as there was a belief in the excellence of the tradition and institutions of Western civilization and of this nation, so long as those values were communicated to the schools and such questioning of everything, I think, was also safe. Our traditions of free critical inquiry counteracted the tendency for received moral and civic teachings from becoming ethnocentric complacency and intolerance and prevented a proper patriotism from degenerating into arrogant chauvinism. When students came to college, they found their values and prejudices challenged by the books they read, by their fellow students from other places and backgrounds, and by, would you believe, their teachers. I suggest to you that the situation is far different today. Whatever the formal religious attachments of our students may be, I find that a firm belief in the traditional values and the ability to understand and the willingness to defend them are rare. Still rarer is an informed understanding of the traditions and institutions of our Western civilization and of our country, and an appreciation of their special qualities and values. The admirable, even the uniquely good elements are taken for granted, as if they were universally available, had always existed, and required no special effort to preserve. All shortcomings, however, are quickly noticed and harshly condemned. Our society is judged not against the experience of human societies in other times and places, but against the kingdom of heaven. There is greater danger in this, for our society, no less than others now and in the past, requires the allegiance and the devotion of its members if it is to defend itself and to make progress towards a better life. Traditional beliefs, however, are not replaced by a different set of values resting on different traditions. Instead, I find a kind of cultural void, an ignorance of the past, a sense of rootlessness and aimlessness, as though not only the students, but also the whole world was born yesterday. a feeling that they are attached to the society in which they live only incidentally and accidentally. Having little or no sense of the human experience through the ages, of what has been tried, of what has succeeded, and what has failed, of what is the price of cherishing some values as opposed to others, or how values relate to one another, they leap from acting as though anything is possible without cost to despairing that nothing is possible. They also are inclined to see other people's values as mere prejudices, one no better than the other, while viewing their own as entirely valid. For they are themselves as autonomous entities entitled to be free from interference by society and from any obligation to it. Because of the cultural vacuum in their earliest and earlier education, and because of the informal education they receive from the communications media, which both shape and reflect the larger society, today's liberal arts students come to college, it seems to me, bearing a sort of relativism verging, as I say, on nihilism, a kind of individualism that is really isolation from community. The education they receive in college these days, I believe, is more likely to reinforce this condition than to change it. In this way, too, it fails in its liberating function, in its responsibility to shape free men and women. Earlier generations who came to college with traditional beliefs rooted in the past had them challenged by hard questioning and the requirement to consider alternatives, and were thereby unnerved, and in the process liberated by the need to make reasoned choices. Students of today and tomorrow deserve the same opportunity. They too must be freed from the tyranny that comes from the accident of being born at a particular time in a particular place. But that liberation can only come from a return to the belief that we may have something to learn from the past. The challenge to the relativism, nihilism, and privatism of the present can best be presented by a careful and respectful examination of earlier ideas, ideas that have not been rejected by the current generation, but are simply unknown to them. When they have been allowed to consider the alternatives, they, too, can enjoy the freedom of making an informed and reasoned choice. But they can't do it if they are left in ignorance. The liberal education needed for the students of today and tomorrow, I suggest, should include a common core of studies for all its students. That would have many advantages, for it would create an intellectual communion among students and teachers that does not now exist. And it would encourage the idea that learning and knowledge are good things in themselves. It would also affirm that some questions are of fundamental importance to everyone, regardless of his origins and his personal plans. That we must all think about our values, responsibilities, and relationships with one another and with the society in which we live. The core I personally would propose would include the study of the literature, philosophy, and history, in which I include the history of the arts and of the physical sciences, of our culture from its origins. It would be a study that tries to meet the past on its own terms, examining it critically, but also respectfully, always keeping alive the possibility that the past may contain wisdom that can be useful to us today. It would be a study that was consciously and deliberately moral and civic in its purpose, eager to examine the values discussed, private and public, personal and political. Such an education would allow, or would show the modern student times and worlds where the common understanding was quite different from his own, where it was believed that man had capacities and a nature that are different from those of the other animals, that his nature is gregarious, and that his flourishing requires an ordered, beneficent society, that his nature can reach its highest perfection only by living a good life in a well-ordered society. It would reveal that a good society requires citizens who understand and share its values, which includes examining it and them critically, and accept their own connection with it and dependence on it, that there must be mutual respect among citizens and common effort by them both for their own flourishing and for its survival. Students enjoying such an education would encounter the idea that freedom is essential to the good and happy life of human beings, but that freedom cannot exist without good laws and respect for them. Aristotle rightly observed that in matters other than scientific, people learn best not by precept, but by example. Let me conclude, therefore, by making it clear that the colleges who claim to offer a liberal education today and tomorrow must make their commitment to freedom clear by their actions. To a university, even more than to other institutions in a free society, the right of free speech, the free exchange of ideas, the presentation of a variety of opinions, especially of unpopular points of view, the freedom to move about and to make use of public facilities without interference are vital. Discussion, argument, and persuasion are the devices appropriate to the life of the mind, not selective exclusion, suppression, obstruction, and intimidation. And yet in my time, our colleges and universities have often seen speakers shouted down or prevented from speaking, buildings forcibly occupied and access to them denied, different modes of intimidation employed with much success. Most of the time, the perpetrators have gone unpunished in any significant way. These assaults typically have come from just one section of opinion, and they have been very successful. Over the years, few advocates of views that challenge the campus consensus have been invited, and fewer still, sometimes victims of such behavior, have chosen to come. Colleges and universities that permit such attacks on freedom and take no firm and effective action to deter and punish those who carry out the sabotage the most basic educational freedoms. And yet, to defend those freedoms is the first obligation of anyone who claims to be engaged in liberal education.